as I said I would before, I'm going to make a motion that we refer this to the next Ways and Means Committee meeting and have Councilmember Quincy help identify what might be the variety of information we're going to ask for. I think we might also want to just ask if Superintendent Miller might be available or her staff be available to be there as well. And we can, I don't have the date right in front of me. And as part of that report, we would want to review information that allows us to understand better the description from the council president of proposed sources. And there may be other things to add to that list. I know Council Member Goodman also mentioned fund balances, so that should probably added to the list. We probably, just one more item, want to have a significant amount of time spent on understanding the capital program, and because there was some discussion of how that capital program could be adjusted to meet some of the needs. So I'm going to rely on Councilmember Quincy to kind of as the chair of that committee, he will be helping to follow up and make it clear what's the information that we're expecting staff to help present. And then I'm sure there will be questions council members are raising in between that also might help drive what's the information that allows us to do our work as expeditiously as possible. Then I also wanted just the opportunity to make a comment. You know, we had a presentation from the superintendent, I'm trying to remember how many months ago it was, to the city council when you said that you were raising the issue of a referendum, and then you were going to later ask your commissioners to vote on that as an option. And I know at that time up here that we had some conversation about that, and people said, I think publicly that, you know, we hadn't quite made up our minds, but on is that a good option or not. But there was some discussion, and I know that I also was one who made a comment that it would be good for some folks to step forward to try to see what could be done to arrive at a better proposal. So I do really want to thank Council President Johnson and Councilmember Goodman for stepping forward and meeting with the park board, trying to develop that relationship that would allow some proposal that was different from a referendum. And some of these things, I think for some of us, including myself, it's legally challenging to think how we would be able to approve that based on information that we have about those options. But also, you know, as others have said, is that really the best option for thinking of how do we work together on our funding challenges? I do think that there are a number of things that we need to vet out and have good discussion of, and that's kind of our job as council members, is to take proposal and then do our work. And if we think that there are challenges, we're going to have to, you know, raise them with the authors and see how we can resolve them. So I know that one other thing I just want to mention, because it's also been part of the public dialogue, is that we have had a very recent presentation on our street funding needs, and I know Council Member Reich had to leave because he is on the tab, so he had another official obligation, but I know that he has been one who has been carefully watching over those challenges, and so we'll want to kind of hear from him on really this issue of balancing needs that we know are very real, and how do we think about that? So again, I just want to say thank you very much to the authors, and we're here to do our work together. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would actually like to offer an amendment to the motion, which is a staff direction. Because of the very tight timeline, I have some specific questions that I just want to make sure are covered in that Ways and Means presentation. So I'd like to direct finance staff to report back with the status of proposed capital sources, including but not limited to. So if other council members have questions, that would be covered as well. Projected end of year general fund balance, anticipated impact to our 5-year financial direction of any legislative action that we expect on our city's library referendum debt, a list of all capital projects for both cities and parks for which bonds have yet to be issued, the potential impact of decertification of TIF districts that were referenced during our 2016 budget process, the impact of anticipated pension obligation reductions to the 5-year financial direction, and any other year-end projected fund balances that could be used to fund unspecified capital projects. And I'm happy to email that to the clerk.
I think that would be, excuse me, this is really loud. How did I get so loud? Is it loud out there?
It's a new system.
Okay. Anyway.
Well,
Okay. All right. So I think Councilmember Bender, that's fine. With those additions, I would advise you just to email staff. And again, I think staff want to be responsive to what are going to be questions. We don't want to not answer anyone's questions that they have. So I would encourage others who may not have questions that they're verbalizing right now to also forward their requests for information. Council President Johnson.
just a question, Madam Chair. It's probably for the city clerk or, I guess city clerk. Does the subject matter stay when we have a receive and file? Does the subject matter stay in this committee, in committee of the whole? I just don't want to have a hiccup where we're tied up in a committee.
Madam Chair, Council President Johnson, the subject matter for discussion here is about the proposed 20-year park plan, and that subject is being received and filed here. It's my understanding further that at the council meeting on Friday, a notice would be introduced that the authors of the resolution have requested in order to start the timeline that was referenced that would bring forward final action on April 15th. That notice simply provides the process to begin if we want to continue the journey to have presentations before the correct council committees about the actual proposal to get funding details as you've outlined. And so the notice would go on Friday simply to start that process. It doesn't prevent the other actions that are being proposed here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But a resolution could come up. This is a resolution we have in front of us right now. We could walk it onto the council agenda on Friday, just like we do with every other resolution. We are not going to do that. We're actually wanting to wait a cycle. I don't know if that was an agreement, but we thought out of respect we would do that. But I do not want to be in a situation where we're informationing, studying, referring to committee, getting more to death. These guys have to have an answer about whether or not we can work out a project with them or a proposal with them or not. And if we can't, then they should get going on the referendum, and we should take into consideration what that would mean in terms of the overall tax base. So I'm expecting an up or down vote on this within a month.
So thanks for sharing your expectations. I don't think anybody's dragging their feet, but nobody's had financial information. I think we're just asking for that basic information that allows us to do our job. So, I think those process descriptions are exactly right. We have discretion on where to send things so that they go through our proper committee process. I'm going to make sure there's a couple more folks in queue that we get a chance to vote on the staff direction, which I don't think is controversy at all. So all in approval of the staff direction with the additional request by Councilmember Bender. In approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And then we have Councilmember Palmisano and then Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to belabor this, but I do just want to propose a suggestion. It's probably really a question for our city clerk. I understand this is a resolution that suggests that we work to draft an ordinance. Any ordinance would certainly have a public hearing in committee. I assume that would be Ways and Means, where there would be full presentations with lots of information. I just want to offer that it might be an alternative to agree that the council resolves to not go the direction of a referendum and then allow all of those more detailed conversations a little bit more time through an ordinance hearing instead. And it's just a comment. If I'm wrong with that, city clerk, please correct me.
I might just, Councilmember Bender, and then I actually wanted to make a comment on that. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I asked a lot of questions today, so I just want to make a brief statement that, I understand how important our parks are to my constituents. We're being told that we must support this deal because a referendum is threatened, and I'm not sure that we have clear legal information to make that decision. There is a significant $4 million difference in the amount of funding we're committing to, but there is no difference in the fact that we have to find the money somehow, either in raising taxes or in cutting spending. I care a lot about parks, but I also care about making sure we have police and fire services that are the levels that my constituents expect. I care about not creating a giant balloon payment for future city councils and taxpayers with deferred maintenance of our crumbling streets. I care about the investments that this council has been making in racial equity. I care about affordable housing. We've been increasing the amount of funding we put in our trust fund. And with all of that, I also need to guard my constituents whose property values are rising against an enormous one-time increase in their taxes, because I have a lot of constituents who are on fixed incomes. And this, of course, is shared across the city. So I want to say that I'm actually a council member who might be one of the most willing to support a 5% or 7% levy increase in order to fund our parks. But we're not making those decisions at the same time. We're being asked to vote on committing funding without making the difficult decisions that we will need to make about either raising taxes or cutting spending in order to pay for that. And I just think that everyone in this room and all of my constituents who care deeply about parks, I know you care about these other things too. And so I think we should all be asking, where are we getting this funding? Are we raising taxes? Are we cutting spending? What spending will be cut? Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make a comment because of Councilmember Palmisano's proposal. I guess I just have kind of a different view of this, which is that, I mean, I think it's fair for the park board to make sure they are keeping all options open before them until they get a final resolution on an alternative. So what we have right now is a proposal. I don't, I'm hopeful that the timeline works, but I want to make sure I have full time to review it. And then I know there are some questions that intersect with what's happening at the legislature. So I think that's another good question about whether we should be sure of some things that kind of depend on what might happen at the session or not. And that's just, I think, a conversation for us to have. I think the park board should continue to do everything they need to do to make sure they have all options before them, knowing that you're hearing a lot of I think, commitment to wanting to work on this proposal that has been presented to us. So that's my comment on that. We have, I think, a last word from Councilmember Andrew Johnson, and then I think we're going to close this portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is actually not about the parks. So this is, I wanted to make sure I at least put it in to get an announcement in there. So if we're done with that, if I could quick.
Then I think, let me just, I think we've received and filed, I just want to make sure I've done everything. We've received and filed, we voted on our staff direction. And so I think if we have I think we need to close out our last portions of the meeting. And I just want to say again, thank you for being here for such a long time, Superintendent Miller and President Walensky and all the other staff and supporters who wanted to make sure they were here for this important conversation. And you're free to leave as we finish up our meeting. We have on the agenda our reports from committees, but I think in note of the time, unless someone has a special request of an item they'd like to discuss, I might just leave it to our own ability to walk through the items. And with that, I think we're done, except for a announcement.
A very brief announcement. Maybe if folks could quietly exit. Excellent. So in honor of Sunshine Week 2016 and as a signal of the City of Minneapolis's commitment to greater transparency and open access to government data, I'm pleased to announce this week the launch of the new Open Government Portal on the city's website. This portal brings together all of the public data and records currently available from the city into a single unified page. The Open Government Portal will provide users with quick, easier access to the tools and information they need to conduct business with the city, to be informed of current legislative activity, to manage information about themselves, and to ensure that government business is always conducted in an environment that is open and accountable to those which it serves. As we progress forward with our efforts towards open government, this portal will continue to evolve to include more tools, technology, and resources for engaging with city data. I want to especially give a big shout out to Grant Johnson within our IT department, who has been just a huge, in our clerk's office, who has been just such a leader on this and is ultimately helping the city look so much better as a result of this effort and add value and resources for all residents. So big shout out to Grant Johnson, everyone who worked on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.